The Mind, Tamer. Chapter 1. The Storm Within. Elias sat at his desk long after the office lights had dimmed, staring at the glow of his computer screen. Numbers swam before his eyes, reports he had promised to finish 2 hours ago. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind was far away, pulled in 10 directions at once. Did I lock the front door this morning? What if I left it open? What if someone breaks in? Why did Martha look at me that way when I presented? Was I talking too fast again? I'm always talking too fast. They must think I'm nervous. Weak. God, I'm tired. But if I go home, I'll just lie awake again, won't I? He rubbed his temples, trying to push the thoughts away. But they only grew louder, multiplying like flies in a sealed room. His chest tightened. He could almost hear the low buzz of panic that lived somewhere deep inside him. This wasn't new. Elias had lived like this for years, a prisoner in the theater of his own mind. Every thought arrived like a noisy actor demanding the spotlight. And he, the audience, could never leave the show. At 34, he was competent enough at work, polite enough with friends, decent enough at pretending everything was fine. But in the quiet hours, the elevator rides, the moments before sleep, the pauses between conversations, the storm inside was unbearable. Tonight, it felt worse than usual. Maybe it was the deadlines. Maybe the look Martha gave him in the meeting. Maybe just another ordinary day of carrying an extraordinary weight. He closed the laptop with a thud, shoved papers into his bag, and left the building. The city air was cool, but heavy with exhaust. Traffic lights flickered against the asphalt, people hurried past, voices blending into a constant murmur. And still, the noise inside didn't stop. On the train ride home, Elias stared out the window at his reflection. His own face looked unfamiliar. Tired eyes, jaw clenched, a faint crease carved permanently into his forehead. He hated that crease. It was proof. Proof of his failures. Proof that his mind owned him. When the train screeched to his stop, he rose quickly, eager to escape the thought spiral. He walked the few blocks to his apartment, fumbled with the keys, and stepped inside. Silence. But even silence had teeth. He sat on the edge of his bed, still in his office clothes. His mind was already galloping. I didn't finish the report. Tomorrow will be hell. I'm going to mess it up again. I always do. Why can't I focus like other people? Why can't I just? And then, for the first time in his life, Elias said something out loud. Stop. His own voice startled him in the quiet room. It was as if someone else had spoken. The thoughts didn't stop, not really, but for the briefest of moments they staggered, like a crowd suddenly frozen mid-step. And in that gap, tiny, fragile, but real, he saw something. What if I don't have to follow every thought? The idea was so strange it felt almost dangerous. He sat there, breathing shallowly, as if he had stumbled onto a secret he wasn't meant to find. He imagined himself standing on a crowded street, thoughts rushing by like pedestrians. Until now, he had chased each one, desperate not to lose track. But what if he just stood still? The storm churned, of course. His mind shouted, argued, pushed. But beneath it all was the memory of that pause, that gap, like a crack in the armor of chaos. For the first time, Elias felt the faintest tremor of hope. Not because the thoughts were gone, but because maybe, just maybe, they didn't own him after all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss more eerie and fascinating tales. Chapter 2. The Question. The next morning began like all the others, alarm, shower, coffee, commute. But beneath the noise in Elias's head, something new lingered, the pause from last night. That strange moment when his own stop had broken through the storm. At his desk, numbers and emails blurred before him. Thoughts swarmed as always. You're behind. You'll disappoint them. You'll never change. But the memory of silence tugged at him. What if I don't have to follow every thought? The idea was absurd. Thoughts told him who he was, what to do, how to survive. Yet most of them only dragged him down. In the break room, he sat with a cup of coffee, steam curling upward. Instead of labeling, judging, or planning, he just listened. The clack of keyboards, the hum of printers, footsteps in the hallway. For a few seconds, He simply noticed. And then the old chorus came back. This is stupid. You're wasting time. You'll fail. His pulse quickened. The storm returned. But Elias had tasted something different, even if only for a heartbeat. That night at home, he tried again, sitting still, focusing on his breath, letting thoughts drift like leaves on a river. They came fast, sharp, demanding. He didn't fight them. He just let them pass. It wasn't peace, not yet. But for the first time, he saw a crack in the walls of his prison. And with it, a question that refused to leave him. What if I could choose which thoughts to follow? Chapter 3, The First Attempt. Elias set his alarm early the next morning. He wanted time before work, time to try again. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, legs crossed awkwardly. He closed his eyes and told himself, just breathe. In, out, in, out. For a few seconds, it worked. Then the rush began. This feels silly. You'll be late. Did you reply to that email? What if the boss calls on you today? What if you freeze? The stream of thoughts dragged him away almost instantly. Within minutes, he was tangled in worries, replaying old mistakes, predicting disasters that hadn't even happened. Frustrated, he opened his eyes. The clock on the wall told him 5 minutes had passed, though it had felt like 50. Still, he wasn't ready to give up. On the train, he tried again. He leaned back in his seat, breathing slow, watching the city pass by through the window. Buildings, trees, people. The usual blur. But he tried not to name them, not to comment. Just see. For a moment, something inside him softened. The chatter dimmed. The world outside seemed sharper, as if it had always been there but hidden beneath the static in his head. Then his phone buzzed. An email. And the storm was back. You forgot the report. They're waiting. You're falling behind again. He sighed. Clearly, this wasn't going to be easy. At the office, he kept practicing in small ways. While waiting for the printer, he focused on the hum of the machine. During lunch, he paid attention to the taste of each bite instead of scrolling his phone. He failed often, his mind leaping back into judgment, worry, self-criticism. But each time he noticed, he tried to return. That night, lying in bed, Elias thought about his attempts. None of them had been perfect. Most felt clumsy. Yet he couldn't ignore the truth. Even in those brief pauses, life felt lighter, clearer, almost peaceful. Maybe control didn't mean shutting off his thoughts completely. Maybe it meant learning to see them, to hold them loosely, to let them go. As sleep pulled him under, a quiet determination rose in him. He would try again tomorrow. And the day after that. Because even the smallest taste of freedom was worth chasing. Chapter 4, The Mentor. The weeks passed, each one marked by Elias's clumsy experiments with silence. Some mornings he managed a few calm breaths. Other times, his thoughts stampeded the moment he closed his eyes. Progress was uneven, fragile. One evening, he stepped out of his apartment for air. The day had been long, and his head was buzzing with half-finished tasks. He walked the quiet street, hands in his pockets, when he noticed his neighbor, an older woman who often sat on her porch with a book. "Rough day?" she asked, glancing up from her reading. Elias gave a tired smile. "You could say that." She studied him for a moment, then closed her book. "You wear your mind on your face, you know. Like it's shouting at you." The words startled him. Few people had ever seen through him so easily. That obvious. "Only to someone who's been there," she said. "I used to live inside a storm, too. Spent half my life believing every thought I had." Elias felt his chest tighten. "And now? Now I choose which ones to feed." She shrugged lightly, as if it were simple. Her name was Clara. Over the next few evenings, they spoke more. She was retired, a teacher once, and she carried herself with the calm of someone who had wrestled with chaos and come out the other side. Clara didn't offer grand philosophies or complicated techniques. Instead, she gave Elias small, practical challenges. Next time a thought hooks you, don't fight it. Just say to yourself, "thinking." Then come back to whatever you're doing. like tugging a balloon back down to earth. Or, when you're anxious, try paying attention to your hands. Notice the warmth, the weight, the texture of what they're holding. It'll anchor you in the present. Elias tried her suggestions. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. But slowly, something shifted. He began to realize his thoughts were not commands. They were events, like raindrops, like passing cars. He didn't have to obey each one. He could watch them come and go. One night, after a long conversation, Clara leaned back in her chair and smiled. The mind is like a stable full of wild horses. You can't stop them from running, but you can learn to guide them, one rein at a time. Elias carried those words with him, repeating them like a mantra. A stable full of wild horses. For the first time, the chaos in his head felt less like a curse, and more like something he might learn to ride. Chapter 5. The Wild Horses. Elias thought often about Clara's metaphor, the mind as a stable full of wild horses. At first, he imagined himself in chaos, hooves pounding, dust rising, reins slipping from his hands. But each day, with her guidance, he practiced. In the mornings, he sat quietly, focusing on his breath. The horses stampeded immediately. Worries about work, memories of past mistakes, stray fragments of song lyrics. He wanted to chase them down, to wrestle them into silence. Instead, he remembered Clara's words, "Guide, don't fight." So he imagined himself standing in the stable, watching the horses run. They were fast, unpredictable, but not dangerous, not if he didn't try to cling to them. At work, he tried shorter exercises. When a wave of stress rose during meetings, he pressed his feet against the floor, reminding himself he was anchored here, not lost in the storm. When criticism from his boss stung, he noticed the anger flaring, then pictured it as a horse galloping past. He didn't have to mount it. Some days went better than others. There were mornings he felt calm, clear, even light, as if the horses were finally circling at a distance instead of trampling him. Other days, he felt trampled all over again, old fears charging in, dragging him helplessly behind them. Frustration gnawed at him. "I'll never get this," he muttered one night, slamming his journal shut. Clara only chuckled. "Did you expect to tame wild horses in a week?" He sighed. "I thought maybe it would get easier faster." "It does," she said gently. "But only if you accept the falls as part of the ride. The horses don't vanish. You just learn not to let them break you." Her patience kept him going. And over time, Elias began to notice something subtle but profound, the gap between thought and action. Before, a single anxious thought could set his whole day spinning. Now, he sometimes caught himself in that instant before he reacted, long enough to choose. It wasn't mastery. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, Elias realized, were powerful things. Chapter 6. The First Victory. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Elias had been up late the night before, lost in spreadsheets, and arrived at work already tense. The office buzzed with the usual chatter, but he barely noticed. His mind was already racing. At the morning meeting, his manager raised a concern. "Elias, the report you submitted last week had some missing data. Can you explain?" In the past, this would have been the spark for an explosion. His chest would tighten, anger would flare, and sharp words would leap out before he could stop them. Later, guilt and shame would chew him raw. And now, the horses were running. He felt the surge. "You're incompetent. They're judging you. Defend yourself, now." But something was different. Clara's voice whispered in his memory. "The horses don't vanish. You just learn not to let them break you." Elias inhaled, slow and steady. He felt his feet on the floor, his hands resting on the table. He saw the thought, anger, fear, charging hard. But this time, he didn't climb on its back. Instead, he paused. And in that pause, he found space. "You're right," he said calmly. "I overlooked that section. I'll correct it today." The room was silent for a beat. Then his manager nodded. "Good. Thanks." The meeting moved on. Elias sat there stunned. His heart was still racing, but the explosion hadn't come. He hadn't been dragged into the storm. He had chosen. For the rest of the day, he felt lighter than he could remember. He smiled more. He even laughed at lunch with a coworker, something he hadn't done in months. That evening, he told Clara what had happened. She listened with quiet satisfaction. There it is. Your first victory. He frowned. It felt small. Small. She shook her head. That was enormous. You saw the horse charging, and you didn't let it throw you. That's the beginning of freedom. Elias walked home that night with a strange warmth in his chest. It wasn't pride, exactly, but something gentler, steadier. Hope. For the first time, he believed this path might truly lead somewhere. Chapter 7. The Deep Waters. Elias's victories, though small, gave him courage. But the deeper he ventured into his mind, the more he realized how tangled it was. Late one night, he sat in his apartment, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the ceiling. Calm days had come, but so had nights filled with relentless worry. Old memories, regrets, fears he hadn't touched in years, surged like waves. He tried his usual practice, sitting quietly, focusing on his breath, imagining the horses running past. But some horses weren't ordinary, they were heavier, darker, harder to ignore. You'll never be enough. You'll fail. Everyone will see you as weak. These were no ordinary office worries. These were the deep waters of his mind, currents he had avoided all his life. And they pulled harder than anything else he'd faced. Elias felt panic rising, a familiar tightening in his chest. He wanted to run, to scroll his phone, to distract himself. But Clara's voice cut through. Guide, don't fight. The horses are stronger here, but they're still horses. Watch them pass. He tried. Slowly, painstakingly, he acknowledged each thought. There it is. That fear. That memory. He didn't chase it, didn't suppress it. He just noted its presence. Minutes stretched. Hours seemed to shrink. For the first time, he faced the dark, turbulent parts of himself without fleeing. By dawn, exhaustion and calm coexisted in a strange balance. Elias realized that controlling thoughts wasn't about banishing them. It was about presence, seeing the currents clearly, choosing which waves to ride. He understood that some nights would always bring storms, but storms didn't have to break him anymore. He could meet them. That day, walking to the office, he felt different, not lighter, but steadier. The deep waters were still there, but he had learned that even the strongest currents could be observed, felt, and survived. It was a lesson far more profound than any report or meeting. Chapter 8. The Test. A sudden project landed on Elias's desk one Monday morning, a high-stakes assignment with a tight deadline. His manager's voice had been crisp. This is critical. Don't fail. Old habits would have made his heart pound, his mind spiral. He would have stayed awake all night, consumed by anxiety and perfectionism. But this time, Elias noticed the surge of panic before it could take over. The horses were running. Fear, doubt, self-criticism, all charging full speed. He closed his eyes at his desk for a breath, acknowledging each thought. Here's anxiety. Here's judgment. Here's doubt. Then, slowly, he exhaled. The rush didn't vanish, but it dulled enough for him to act. He organized his tasks, one small step at a time. When frustration flared, he pressed his feet into the floor, grounding himself. When guilt rose at a tiny mistake, he labeled it, thinking, and moved on. Hours passed. The storm inside raged and subsided in waves, but Elias didn't lose his footing. He didn't let himself be swept away. By evening, the project was complete, accurate, thorough, submitted on time. His manager praised his work, but Elias barely noticed. The real victory was inside him. He had faced a true test, a moment where fear could have controlled every action. And he had chosen differently. For the first time, he felt a deep, unshakable confidence, not arrogance, but certainty that he could navigate the chaos within. That night, walking home under the quiet city lights, Elias smiled. The horses were still there, yes, but now, he could ride with them rather than be trampled. Chapter 9. The Mastery. Weeks turned into months, and Elias's practice became part of every moment, subtle but steady. The small victories had grown into a rhythm of life, noticing thoughts without reacting, guiding the wild horses instead of chasing them. He noticed changes not just in work, but in life. Conversations no longer triggered endless loops of doubt. He could enjoy meals without analyzing every bite, walks without mental commentary, laughter without self-criticism. One evening, he sat on his balcony, the city stretched below him, lights twinkling like distant stars. He closed his eyes, feeling the familiar currents inside. Anxiety rose, as it always did. Thoughts raced. Memories flared. But Elias didn't chase them. He labeled them, watched them, let them pass. A strange sense of freedom filled him. Control wasn't about silencing the mind. It was about being present with it. Clara visited that night. She watched him quietly for a moment, then said, "You've done it, Elias. You've learned to guide them, not fight them. Not perfectly, but masterfully enough to live freely." Elias smiled, thinking of all the struggles, all the nights facing deep waters, all the tests. He understood now. Mastery wasn't a destination, it was a practice. A dance with the mind. And for the first time in his life, he felt fully awake, fully himself. No longer a passenger to the storm inside, but the rider, calm and steady, moving through whatever came next. Chapter 10. The New Horizon. The morning sun spilled across Elias's apartment, golden and warm, filtering through thin curtains like threads of light weaving a new beginning. He stood by the window, cradling his coffee cup, feeling the quiet hum of the city below. The streets were waking, cars buzzing, vendors calling, footsteps echoing. But none of it reached the storm that once lived inside him. The wild horses of his mind were still there, of course. Thoughts still raced, doubts still whispered, fears still lingered in shadows. But he no longer feared them. He no longer tried to cage them or flee from them. He guided them, observed them, and let them pass without letting them dictate his day. He remembered the man he had been just a year ago, reactive, restless, carried away by every fleeting thought. That man, who once spiraled at a single critique or a minor mistake, now felt like a distant stranger. The bridge he had crossed to reach himself was paved with patience, practice, and countless quiet victories. Elias thought of Clara, smiling softly at the memory of her steady presence. Her small but persistent lessons, label the thought, feel your feet, watch the horse, had led him here. He realized that each struggle, every late night wrestling with memories, fears, and regrets, had not been punishment but preparation. Each difficulty had strengthened his mind like a blacksmith forging steel. The horizon outside stretched endlessly, a metaphor he now understood intimately. Life would always bring storms, but storms no longer dictated the path. He could navigate them. He could choose how to respond. Each thought, no matter how intense, was a wave to ride, not a current to drown in. Elias stepped away from the window and out into the streets. Each footfall grounded him, a subtle reminder that he was present, alive, and in control of his own rhythm. The world was the same as always, yet somehow brighter, sharper, and more alive. A vendor smiled, a child laughed, the wind carried the scent of fresh bread, and he noticed it all without judgment or distraction. He thought, for the first time clearly, about the future. Not as a place of uncertainty to fear, but as an open horizon of possibilities. The mind, once a storm, was now a landscape to explore, a vast expanse of thoughts, emotions, and experiences that he could navigate with calm and intention. Elias smiled, a smile full of quiet triumph and deep peace. Each thought was no longer a threat, but a companion. Each challenge was no longer a trap, but an opportunity to practice mastery. The city, the sun, the life bustling around him, all felt like a reflection of the calm he had cultivated inside. He breathed in deeply, feeling the steady rhythm of his mind, the freedom he had earned through patience, courage, and relentless self-observation. The horizon stretched endlessly ahead, full of promise and mystery. And Elias walked forward, not afraid, not reactive, but fully present, fully himself. Every step was a choice. Every moment a victory. And in that, he discovered the most profound freedom of all, the freedom to be the master of his own mind.